Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, whatever you are. Welcome to this week's Esoteric Podcast. This week we will be looking at the Lost Lamuria. Lemuria is said to be a continent that once existed in the Pacific Ocean, long since gone and destroyed by natural causes, some sort of cataclysm, or some other means we don't know, but we are going to take a look at it anyway. So if you'll excuse the pun, let's take a deep dive into this. All over the world, in every native culture, you will find stories of a great flood and an incredible geological upheaval. There is no doubt that an unimaginable catastrophe, or more likely catastrophes, were visited upon Earth between approximately 11,000 and 5,000 BC. The geological and biological evidence is overwhelming and in support of the countless stories and traditions that describe such events. They come from Europe, Scandinavia, Russia, Africa, throughout the Americas, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, China, Japan, and the Middle East. Everywhere that humans have been. Some speak of great heat that boiled the sea, of the mountains breathing fire, the disappearance of the sun and the moon, and the darkness that followed. The raining down of blood, ice and rock, the earth flipping over, the sky falling, the rising and sinking of land, the loss of great continents, the coming of the ice, and virtually all of them describe a fantastic flood, a wall of water which swept across the earth. The tidal wave caused by the comet of the movie Deep Impact gives you some idea of what it would have been like. Old Chinese texts describe how the pillars supporting the sky crumbled, how the sun, moon and stars poured down in the northwest, where the sky became low. Rivers, seas, oceans rushed to the southeast, where the earth sank, and the great conflagration was quenched by a raging flood. In the Americas, the Pawnee Indians tell the same story of a time when the North and South polar stars changed place and went to visit one another. North American tradition refers to great clouds appearing and a heat so powerful that the waters boiled. The Greenland Eskimos told early missionaries that long ago the earth was turned over. Peruvian legends say that the Andes Mountains were ripped apart when the sky made war with the earth. Brazilian myths describe how the heavens burst and fragments fell down, killing everything and anyone as heaven and earth changed places. The Hopi Indians of North America recorded that the earth was rent in a great chasm and the water covered everything except one narrow ridge of mud. All of this closely correlates with the legend of Atlantis and Lemuria, or as church would have it, Mu. These were two vast continents, one somewhere around the Atlantic Ocean, the other somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, which many people believe were ruled by highly advanced races that originated from possibly other worlds or dimensions. Both continents were said to have disappeared under the sea in the circumstances I've just described, leaving only islands like the Azores and Polynesia as remnants of their former scale and glory. Atlantis is said by some to have emerged after the sinking of Lemuria. Others believe their existence was concurrent, as in the case of many that I researched for this. The most thorough and outstanding researcher of Lemuria, or Mu as he put it, was Colonel James Churchward, who wrote a series of books in the first half of the 20th century. Churchward visited remote monasteries in Asia and saw the ancient records of the motherland of Mu, or Lemuria, whichever way around you want it, going back between 12,000 and 70,000 years. He saw how it was the center of a global empire that included Atlantis. In his book The Children of Mu, published in 1931, he shows the various racial types on Mu. These Lemurian races went east to become the Mayans of Central America and the other builders of fantastic structures of the American continent. They went west to become the people of Asia, China, India, and elsewhere, and created colonies in what became Egypt and Sumer. All genetic and cultural roads, he says, lead back to Lemuria Mu, the motherland, and the very advanced civilization that existed tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years before today's modern society. Churchward said that Lemuria was destroyed around 12,000 years ago. W.T. Samsel, in his study of these ancient societies, The Atlantis Connection, dates the end of Lemuria much earlier, but many of their basic themes are similar. Samsel's book is based on channeled information, so one has to question it. Creation consists of an infinite number of wavelengths and frequencies, and the world we perceive with our physical senses is only a mere tiny fraction of the frequencies that exist. Just as we cannot see the radio and television frequencies sharing the same space as our bodies at this very moment, we cannot see with our limited physical senses the other frequencies and wavelengths of creation that also occupy the same space that we do. Samsel claims to be in contact with an entity formerly incarnate in Atlantis and that now communicates from one of these other frequencies. Most channeled information, in my experience, is either nonsense or extremely limited, but many of Samsel's themes are supported by geological and biological record. He believes that it was about 100,000 years ago that the first examples of modern human forms appeared on the island of Lemuria, in what is now the Pacific Ocean. These were intended to be perfect vehicles, he said. As they began to explore the Earth, they seeded the land that is known as Atlantis, which is said to be in the Atlantic on the geologically unstable Mid-Atlantic Ridge, although there are those that would say it is the Rorschach structure in Africa. Also says the earlier Atlanteans were a dark-skinned people not unlike the Native Americans. He believes that Native American people are direct descendants from Lemurian and Atlanteans who settled in the Americas before the first great cataclysm some 48,000 years ago, and the Native American legends support this theme. His view is that in the early days of Atlantis and Lemuria, the people lived under the law of one, the understanding that everything is the same energy expressing itself in different forms. The law of one is the knowledge that everything is connected to everything else and ultimately is an expression of the whole or same energy. And to all you science buffs out there, you know this is the unified field theory we're talking about here. This is a common theme of Atlantean myths and legends, a civilization that began with positive intent and in harmony with the natural laws, but was taken over by forces that transformed it into a very dark place indeed. Samsel suggests that there was a war between the gods in ancient mythology, which was a war between extraterrestrial races over the question of intervention and non-intervention in Earth affairs. He says that midway through the early Atlantean age, extraterrestrials with human-like appearance, very tall, light-haired, light-skinned, albino-like people, made contact with the Atlanteans. They began to manipulate Atlantean society, he says, and interbreed with humans to change the DNA and create a hybrid bloodline that became the royal lineage of kings and queens. I would include Lemuria in this same story also. The technological and physical appearance of these extraterrestrials led the Atlantean Lemurians to see them as gods, intermarrying with these beings to produce light-skinned offspring with these godlike features became the goal of many Atlanteans, Samsel writes, and these cross-breeds became the dominant force. They took over the government, economics, education, religion, and communications. Sound familiar? Samsel says that the kings of the white royal lineage ruled Atlantis, and what he calls the son of Belial controlled the temple of the sun, their religious hierarchy and ritual network. Today, this Atlantean temple of the sun is known as the Illuminati. During this period, many Atlanteans of the red race migrated west to the Americas, which were then geographically different to what we see today. And to directly quote from Samsel, he goes on, "The age of the Atlantic Empire would prove to be a free-for-all for the sons of Belial and the followers of the Temple of the Sun. The dominant white tribe came to rule all aspects of Atlantean society. They disregarded the law of one, placed their faith in technology, and were driven by greed and lust for power. The arms of the Atlantic Empire came to stretch nearly worldwide. The Americas and Africa, the European countries, the Middle East, India, and Tibet came under the control of the empire. The one temple was divided and ineffective. The Sun Temple flourished, and the sons of Belial prospered. During that time, one Lord priests were leading migrations of the red race west to the Americas and east to the Africas. They sought to preserve the law of one, and so they built new circles in the far lands." Some will say the second great cataclysm brought an end to Atlantis. He believed that they used their superweapons against what we now call China and tried to utilize the Earth as a great conductor through which to direct their adversaries using the vast crystal, which is a common theme in Atlantean stories. But he says that the Earth hurled the force back upon them and the final disastrous cataclysm was triggered. Samsel claims that the white race is the force behind global control. Throughout the history of the Earth and mankind, it has been the white tribe that has consistently exhibited the characteristics of their ancestral heritage. It is these who openly display many of the characteristics of otherworldly or alien beings. They have embraced technology above spirituality and have manipulated spirituality to achieve their own ends. They traditionally display little regard for the earth, nature, or other species of living creatures. Throughout recorded history, they have sought domination over all others on the earth itself. They have been highly programmed and conditioned to be exclusive, aggressive, and dominating. Presently, these lead humanity towards the New World Order, consciously or unconsciously carrying out the agenda of the Illuminati, hence the extraterrestrial manipulators. The themes of Samsel's research are supported by many others, although there are differences in detail. It is often the view of those such as David Icke that what he calls the son of Belial are what he calls the reptilian bloodlines, the result of interbreeding between the white or Nordic race and the reptilian people. In the end, however, it's the same theme that really matters in the understanding of the basic background of the world today. The tussle between the Atlantean advocates of the Law of One and the opposing Temple of the Sun is highly significant. The Temple of the Sun has been the religion of the Illuminati from Atlantis and Lemuria right through to present times. In fact, today's world is the new Atlantis, a mirror of the obsession with technological dominance that led to the destruction of the first Atlantean civilization. Put simply, the Law of One sees everything as connected, part of the same unified whole, and the Temple of the Sun represents the desire to present everything as unconnected and isolated from everything else. One seeks to unite, the other to divide, and therefore to rule. Atlantis was described by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. He was also a high initiate of the secret society of the Mystery School Network. To this day, this secret network has passed on advanced knowledge to a chosen few while denying that privilege to the masses of the people. Official history dismisses Plato's contention that such a continent existed, but there is vast geological support for such claims. The Azores, which some believe were part of Atlantis, lie on the mid-Atlantic ridge, a fracture line that encircles the planet. This line continues for a distance of some 40,000 miles. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is one of the foremost areas for earthquakes and volcanoes. Four vast tectonic plates, the Eurasian, African, North American, and Caribbean, all meet and collide in this region, making it very unstable, geologically speaking. Both the Azores and Canary Islands were subjected to widespread volcanic activity in the time period of Plato suggested for the end of Atlantis. Saxylite lava disintegrates in seawater within about 15,000 years and yet is still found on the seabed around the Azores, confirming geologically recent upheavals. Other evidence includes beach sand gathered from depths of around 10,500 to 18,440 feet, revealing that the seabed in this region must have been, again geologically recently, above sea level. The oceanographer Maurice Irving wrote in the National Geographic magazine that either the land must have sunk 2 or 3 miles or the sea must have once been 2 or 3 miles lower than now. Either conclusion is startling. When European explorers first landed in the Canary Islands, the people said they were descendants of the Atlanteans and were shocked to realize that other people had survived the cataclysm that destroyed their homeland. The geological and biological evidence also suggests that the widespread volcanic activity that caused the sinking of the land in the region of the Azores happened at the same time as the breakup and sinking of the land masses known as the Appalachians, which connected what we now call Europe, North America, Iceland and Greenland. Even their degree of submergence appears to be closely related. The so-called Bermuda Triangle between Bermuda, southern Florida, and the point near the Antilles has long been associated with Atlantis. It is an area steeped in legends of disappearing ships and aircraft. Submerged buildings, walls, roads, and stone circles like Stonehenge, even what appear to be pyramids, have been located near Bimini under the waters of the Bahama Banks within the triangle. There have also been walls or roads creating intersecting lines discovered. Some other facts that most people don't know: the Himalayas, Alps, Andes, and at least most other mountain ranges were only formed or reached anything like their present height about 12,000 years ago. Lake Titicaca on the Peru-Bolivia border is today the highest navigable lake in the world at some 12,500 feet. Around 11,000 years ago, much of that region was at sea level. Why are so many fish and other ocean fossils found high up on mountain ranges? Because those rocks were once at sea level, and recently so in geological terms too. How interesting then that Plato dated the cataclysm that destroyed the continent of Atlantis to around 9000 BC, and so do Allen and Dallaire in their superb work When the Earth Nearly Died. They said it happened around 9500 BC. The American researcher Charles Hapgood claimed the surface of the Earth had moved by some 3,000 miles around 10,000 BC. Rocks that contain iron act like a compass. As the molten rock cools, the molecules align with the North Pole, and even if those rocks are moved, they continue to hold that connection. This allowed Hapgood to establish that before 10,000 BC, the physical North Pole had been located on the land in the region occupied today by the Hudson Bay in Canada. But something happened around that time to move the whole surface of the Earth 3,000 miles to the south, thus relocating the land of the then North Pole to the Hudson Bay area. This is not as fantastic as it first sounds. The land surface or crust of the planet is only about 40 miles thick. It has been likened to the skin of an orange resting on a sea of molten lava. If a meteor or other major body impacted with the Earth, it could cause the crust to slide, and according to the writer and researcher Colin Wilson, there is geological evidence that this has happened 3 times in the last 10,000 years. Measurements of the Earth's magnetic field have shown that the north and south magnetic poles have changed place at least 171 times in the past 76 million years, and imagine the effect of a magnetic pole shift on the weather alone. The Canadian writer Rand Flemath, who spent more than 20 years researching these subjects, is convinced that at least a large proportion of Atlantis is what we now call Antarctica because of this 3,000-mile shift to the south. Hapgood, following up on the work of Captain Arlington H. Mallory, studied hundreds of maps found in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., which prove that the world was mapped thousands of years ago to great accuracy. One map made by Orontius Phineas in 1531 shows Antarctica with running rivers and ice-free mountains. The famous map drawn by the Turkish sailor Piri Reis in 1513 found the Palace of the Sultan in Constantinople in 1929 charts the South American coastline with great accuracy and part of the coast of Antarctica before it was discovered with ice 2 miles thick some 7,000 years ago. Yet Antarctica was not discovered officially until Captain Cook arrived in 1773, and it was not explored in detail until the 1950s. Some of the mountain ranges on the Piri Reis map are not even found until 1952. Reis is said to have compiled his map from 20 older ones. Flemath has also found astonishing evidence to support the existence of a highly advanced civilization thousands of years ago. He found that if you draw a line of longitude through the Great Pyramid at Giza, it crosses more land than anywhere else on the planet, and this supports the ancient Egyptian belief that the pyramid was the center of the Earth. Flemath then realized that if the Great Pyramid is taken to be the center of the 0-degree meridian, the longitude and latitudinal locations of the world's sacred sites fit together in a neat geometrical pattern. They appear as a grid system very much like the blocks on the streets of a US city. He found that he could predict where a sacred site would be purely from the system. This geometrical perfection is not the case if you take the present Greenwich Observatory in London to be the 0-degree central point. It throws the whole system out. Greenwich was chosen by a committee only in 1884, despite protest by one prominent member, the Astronomer Royal of Scotland, Charles Bazazi Smith, that the 0-degree meridian should run through the Great Pyramid. Flemeth has further established that some 50 sacred sites in Mexico are aligned to a North Pole located somewhere in the Hudson Bay area, as it was before the cataclysm. Even those built since the upheavals have been placed on older sites that align with the old North Pole. The same is true of the Rosslyn Chapel near Edinburgh in Scotland. This is an Illuminati holy grail full of their ancient symbols and built by the St. Clair family, one of the foremost of the Illuminati bloodlines and one of the founding forces behind the Knights Templar Secret Society. I think we all know that by now, thank you, Dan Brown. Charles Hapgood, incidentally, had a meeting arranged with President Kennedy to discuss a project to find Atlantis, but Kennedy died in Dallas a few days before their appointment. Hapgood also told Rand Flemeth that he was going to produce evidence in his next book of an advanced civilization on Earth 100,000 years ago, but Hapgood soon died afterwards, and the book was never written. James Churchwood, however, produced such evidence in his books, and he tells how he saw maps of South America and elsewhere in these remote Asian monasteries going back tens of thousands of years. This evidence supports the view that the continent known as Mu or Lemuria now rests on the bed of the Pacific. The Polynesian tribes and other related peoples retain many legends of their sunken land of origin, and the Easter Island natives in the Pacific claim their land was once part of a continent destroyed by a cataclysm. A Chinese text found in a Buddhist cave called the Dunhung in western China in 1900 included fragments of a map that featured an island continent in the Pacific. South American legend tells of the same story, their ancestors arriving from a lost continent. Among them a guy called Amu Maru, who carried the knowledge of the Lemurian Brotherhood or School's mysteries. The Hopi tribe in Arizona remember Lemuria as a series of islands by which they traveled to the American continent. Why isn't the story of the Atlantis and Mu a key part of the official history? Because the knowledge has been systematically suppressed and destroyed. That is the simple answer to this. The astronomer Carl Sagan said that a text detailing Atlantis, called The True History of Mankind over the last 100,000 years, was destroyed with thousands of others when the Great Library of Alexandria in Egypt was destroyed in 391 AD. Once we know of these advanced civilizations that lasted hundreds of thousands of years and the extraterrestrial involvement of their creation and demise, our whole view of the world and ourselves has to change. So will our understanding of what is happening and who is controlling us today. The destruction of ancient knowledge all over the world in the name of Christianity was the Illuminati or the Temple of the Sun destroying the true accounts, not only of history but also of the Law of One. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's episode. I know this is a bit of a departure from the usual material, but I'm trying to mix it up here and just cover subjects that I find fascinating myself. If you would like to hear more on this subject, then do leave a comment, and don't forget to hit the like button to subscribe and to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And on top of that, if you would like to join us over on Patreon, we have exclusive early access to episodes at least a week in advance, and there are other good freebies and bonuses available for those who dig deep into the pockets. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much for listening, and to wish you a good day, good afternoon, good night, wherever, whenever, whatever you are. And until next time, thank you and goodbye.